Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. Imagine a simple man who spent his entire life working with his own hands. Everything he did was for his daughter, the person he loved more than anything else in the world. On what seemed like a perfectly ordinary day, he left home in the morning, said goodbye to her, and told her, "I'll see you tonight," just as he always did. But that night never came. Not because he stayed late at work, not because he traveled somewhere or went far away. No, at the very moment he was supposed to be heading home, he was being murdered. What's even more disturbing is that among the people closest to him was someone who should have been the first to panic, search for him, and worry about his disappearance. Instead, that person remained strangely calm, as if they already knew he was never coming back. So, let's go back to the very beginning of this story and discover how an ordinary day turned into a nightmare that changed an entire family's life forever. On January 18th, 2024, in the village of Abu Dashisha, part of Belkas district in Dakalia Governorate, an electronics repair technician was closing his workshop, just like he did every evening before sunset, getting ready to head home and check on his daughter. His name was Ashraf Saeed Abdelhamid. He was 48 years old, and everyone in the village knew him as a quiet, peaceful man who never had problems with anyone. He was highly respected for both his character and his work. But that day, Ashraf never made it home at his usual time. 1 hour passed, then another. Night had completely fallen and he was still nowhere to be found. His family tried calling him over and over again, but his phone was switched off. Their concern grew with every passing minute, and eventually his brothers and elderly father decided to go out and see what had happened. Ashraf lived alone with his only daughter in an apartment separate from the rest of the family, although they all lived nearby in the same village. When his relatives arrived, they found his daughter sitting calmly inside. She didn't appear nervous or worried at all, even though her father had been missing since that morning and no one had heard from him. When they asked where he was, she told them that her father had called earlier and said that a customer needed him to repair an electronic device and that he would be home a little late. But the hours kept passing. It simply didn't make sense for a man to spend that much time repairing a device at a stranger's house. Something wasn't right, and although the family couldn't explain exactly what it was, they all felt it. That night felt endless. Ashraf's brother searched everywhere he could think of: the workshop, his friends' homes, even the hospital near the village, fearing he might have been involved in an accident on his way home from work. There was no sign of him. His elderly father sat outside the house waiting, and every time he heard the sound of a motorcycle or a passing car, he would stand up, hoping it was his son returning home. Time moved painfully slowly. Every minute made the family's fear even worse. Meanwhile, Mena remained inside the apartment. Whenever someone asked her a question, she answered with an unsettling sense of calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Her behavior was so strange that several family members quietly exchanged suspicious glances without saying a word. None of them could explain why, but they all felt that something was terribly wrong. The following morning, after more than 24 hours had passed without any trace of Ashraf, the family went to the police station and officially reported him missing. They told investigators that several things seemed suspicious. The apartment was unusually messy, and Ashraf's daughter had been behaving in a way that didn't match the seriousness of the situation. Detectives immediately began looking into Ashraf's life. They asked about his relationships, whether he had any enemies, whether he owed anyone money, or if anyone had threatened him. Every answer was exactly the same. He was a kind, hard-working man with no known enemies. His entire life revolved around his daughter, and his job. While investigators continued questioning people and searching for leads, they received a call from a farmer working beside an irrigation canal near the village. The farmer had noticed something unusual floating on the surface of the water. As he moved closer for a better look, he was horrified to realize it was the body of a man. The news spread through the village like wildfire. The moment Ashraf's family heard about it, they rushed to the scene. But the security forces had arrived first. They immediately sealed off the area with a security cordon and prevented anyone from approaching until the victim's identity could be confirmed. The body was wrapped in a bed sheet, with both the hands and feet tied together using ropes. The scene was so horrifying that Ashraf's sister, who was standing nearby, noticed something strange. The bed sheet looked familiar. She had a strong feeling she had seen it before, but in that moment, she didn't say anything. The body was transferred to the forensic laboratory for official identification. A few hours later, the confirmation came. The victim was indeed Ashraf Saeed Abdel Hamid. The moment the family identified the body was one of the most heartbreaking experiences they could ever endure. Until then, they had held on to a small glimmer of hope, that perhaps there was another explanation, that maybe Ashraf had traveled unexpectedly or had suffered a minor accident and would eventually come home. That hope disappeared in an instant. The elderly father, who had spent the entire night sitting outside his home, waiting for his son to return, was suddenly forced to accept the unimaginable reality that he had lost him forever, and in an unimaginably brutal way. When the forensic report was completed, its findings were even more disturbing. Ashraf had not died a quick or natural death. He had been struck repeatedly in the head with a heavy, blunt object. The blows were delivered with such extreme force that his facial features had been completely disfigured. As if that weren't enough, investigators found multiple stab wounds to his chest and abdomen, suggesting that whoever committed the crime wanted to make absolutely certain there was no chance he could survive. The sheer brutality of the attack made one thing clear. This wasn't a crime committed in a moment of anger. It showed clear intent, careful determination, and a deliberate decision that Ashraf had to die. Investigators brought the family back in for another round of questioning. This time, Ashraf's sister mentioned the bed sheet she believed she recognized. When police showed her the sheet that had been wrapped around the body, she became completely certain. It was the exact same bed sheet that had been inside her brother's apartment. That discovery changed the entire direction of the investigation. Whoever had killed Ashraf had direct access to his home and had been able to use his personal belongings without difficulty. At the same time, Ashraf's sister spoke about something else that had caught her attention: the behavior of her niece on the night her father disappeared. She told investigators that when she entered the apartment, she was surprised by how unusually messy it was. When she asked Mena why the apartment was in such disarray, the girl calmly replied that she simply hadn't cleaned it for several days. The explanation didn't convince her aunt at all. Something about the answer felt wrong, and her suspicions toward the girl began to grow. Investigators then decided to question Mena and her fiancé separately. The fiancé, a young man around 19 years old named Mohammed, worked as a tuk-tuk driver. He was also the one who regularly drove his future father-in-law to work every morning. The interrogation was intense. Under mounting pressure, Mohammed eventually broke down and confessed to his role in the murder. But the biggest shock came when he began revealing the entire story: how the crime had been planned, why it had happened, and, most importantly, the role played by his fiancée, Mena, the victim's only daughter, who had allegedly been involved in planning every step of the murder from beginning to end. Before we continue with the next part of this story, It's worth pausing for a moment to understand the impact this crime had on the entire village. Ashraf wasn't just known by his family. His neighbors, customers, old friends, and nearly everyone who had crossed paths with him remembered him as an honest, kind-hearted, hard-working man. A village that was accustomed to the ordinary routines of daily life suddenly found itself at the center of one of the most horrifying murders anyone could imagine. And everyone kept asking the same question: who could possibly have done something like this to him? At that point, no one could have imagined that the answer would turn out to be so devastating, because it came from inside his own home. To truly understand this story, we have to go back many years before the day of the murder. Ashraf Saeed got married around 16 years before the crime, sometime in 2008. He married a woman from the same village, a member of a well-known and respected family. About a year later, they were blessed with their only child, a daughter they named Mena. From the day Mena was born, Ashraf's entire life revolved around her. But that peaceful life didn't last forever. When Mena was around 13 years old, her mother passed away. Overnight, she found herself growing up without a mother at an age when she needed one more than ever. Ashraf was devastated by the loss of his wife, but from that moment on, he made an important decision. He would be both a father and a mother to his daughter. He told his family that he had no intention of marrying again because he feared that another wife might negatively affect Mena or treat her unfairly. From that day forward, he completely changed his daily routine. Although his work as an electronics repair technician often kept him busy until late in the evening, he began closing his workshop earlier every day so he could be home before sunset. His goal was simple: to spend as much time as possible with his daughter and make sure she was never left alone for long. However, Ashraf's decision didn't last forever. His relatives continued pressuring him, insisting that he needed a wife who could help raise Mena and share the responsibilities of running the household. Eventually, he gave in and agreed to marry again. But the second marriage quickly fell apart. Conflicts soon began between the new wife and Mena, and before long, the marriage ended in divorce. After that experience, Ashraf made up his mind once and for all. He would never marry again. From then on, his only focus would be raising his daughter and ensuring she received a good education, even if it meant spending the rest of his life alone. When Mena turned 15, one of Ashraf's longtime friends approached him with a proposal. He wanted his son, who was close to Mena's age, to become engaged to her. Ashraf rejected the proposal immediately. He insisted that his daughter was still too young and had not yet reached the legal age for marriage. His refusal created serious tension between the two friends. The disagreement became so intense that the man complained to Ashraf's relatives and tried every possible way to persuade him. Eventually, after the family's elders stepped in to mediate, everyone agreed on a compromise. The engagement would take place immediately, but the marriage itself would be postponed until Mena reached the legal age, roughly 3 years later. Before the engagement took place, Ashraf made sure to explain to his friend and both families that his initial refusal had nothing to do with Mohammed himself. He simply wanted to protect his daughter from entering marriage before she was old enough. Besides, Mohammed was also from Abu Dashisha village, and Ashraf had known his family for many years through his long-time friendship with Mohammed's father. The engagement took place, and Mena's relationship with her fiancé, Mohammed, continued to grow stronger. Before long, both of them became eager to get married before the date that had originally been agreed upon. Mohammed repeatedly asked Ashraf to move the wedding forward, and Minna openly supported her fiancé's requests in front of her father. But Ashraf firmly refused and insisted on sticking to their original agreement. It wasn't simply stubbornness. Every time they brought up the subject, he patiently explained the serious consequences of marrying before the legal age. For example, if they had a child, the child's legal registration could become complicated, and if the marriage ran into problems, Minna would have no legal rights because, in the eyes of the law, she would not be officially married. He tried to make them understand over and over again, but each conversation ended the same way, with more pressure and more insistence that he approve an earlier wedding. There is another important point that should be mentioned. Ashraf wasn't refusing the marriage simply because he wanted to follow the law. He had been planning for Minna's future for years. He had already prepared an apartment in her name, and little by little he kept buying furniture and household appliances so that when the time came for the actual wedding, he could ease the financial burden on both her and her future husband. Ashraf wasn't being stingy, nor was he against his daughter's marriage. On the contrary, he was doing everything he could to make sure she started her married life comfortably. All he wanted was for the marriage to take place at the right time, after she had reached the legal age, so her future would be protected both legally and financially. But the ending that no one could have imagined was that all of this love and care would be repaid with a completely different kind of betrayal. According to Muhammad's confession, the idea of getting rid of Ashraf had not been his. He claimed it was Minna who first suggested it. Muhammad said that he had proposed a different plan, that they run away together, get married somewhere far from the village, and force Ashraf to accept the situation afterward. But Minna rejected the idea for one simple yet chilling reason. If she ran away, and her father later passed away, she might lose the apartment that had been registered in her name, as well as her father's money and all the household items he had been buying for her. Instead of running away, Minna allegedly suggested something far more horrifying, eliminating her father altogether so that she would keep the apartment, the money, and everything he had prepared for her, while also being free to marry her fiancé without any obstacle. The idea itself was shocking. Minna was only 15 years old, and her fiancé was a young tuk-tuk driver who was just beginning his adult life. Yet, according to the investigation, they had reached the point of plotting to kill the very man who had devoted himself to giving them a secure future. It was something that many people struggled to comprehend when the details of the case later became public. According to the prosecution's findings, there had been no major conflict or ongoing abuse by Ashraf toward his daughter. Instead, investigators concluded that their desire to rush the marriage and obtain everything they wanted without waiting was one of the key motives that drove them to plan the crime. According to the prosecution's case, Muhammad and Minna had agreed together to carry out the murder. Muhammad took advantage of the fact that Ashraf trusted him completely. Since he drove Ashraf to work in his tuk-tuk every morning, he was able to put his plan into motion without raising any suspicion. On the day of the murder, January 18, 2024, Muhammad called Ashraf early in the morning, just as he usually did. This time, however, he told him that his tuk-tuk had broken down and asked Ashraf to meet him at the storage garage where he kept the vehicle. Ashraf had no reason to suspect anything. Believing he was simply going to help someone he trusted, he went to the location. As soon as Ashraf entered the garage, Muhammad allegedly attacked him. According to investigators, he struck him repeatedly in the head with a heavy iron pipe until he collapsed to the ground. He then stabbed him multiple times in the chest and abdomen before making sure he was dead. Afterward, Muhammad called Minna and told her that he had finished the job. According to the investigation, Mena then brought a bedsheet and ropes. Together, they wrapped Ashraf's body, tied his hands and feet, and dumped him into an irrigation canal on the outskirts of the village. The evidence uncovered during the investigation was extensive. After Muhammad's initial confession, investigators examined his mobile phone and discovered numerous messages exchanged between him and Mena. According to the prosecution, the messages discussed the murder plan in detail, including how it would be carried out. Even after the body had been disposed of, Muhammad allegedly reassured Mena through messages that everything had been taken care of. Investigators also said that one of Muhammad's final messages instructed Mena to delete their WhatsApp conversations. However, prosecutors stated that the available digital evidence was sufficient to establish both defendants' alleged involvement in the crime. Following Muhammad's confession, Mena was arrested as well. During the investigation, she also confessed to her role in planning and carrying out the crime against her father, according to prosecutors. The case was referred to the Mansoura Criminal Court, where the trial began. During the proceedings, Muhammad attempted to withdraw responsibility by claiming that his fiancée had been the one who committed the murder. However, according to the prosecution, his initial confession, Mena's statements, and the digital evidence presented before the court outweighed his later denial. The trial itself was filled with emotion. Ashraf's family, who were also Mena's family through her grandfather, aunts, and other relatives, sat in the courtroom listening to the details of the murder of their son, while, at the same time, watching their own granddaughter stand accused in the very same case. It was an incredibly painful scene for everyone present. The prosecution presented all of its evidence, including the forensic report describing the brutal manner of the killing, the bedsheet that investigators traced back to Ashraf's apartment, and the messages exchanged between Muhammad and Mena, which prosecutors said documented the planning of the murder step by step. The court also heard lengthy testimony from Muhammad regarding the circumstances of the crime. During the proceedings, he attempted to change his account, claiming that it was his fiancée who had actually committed the murder and that he was innocent of all the charges. He asked the court to acquit him and order his release. In the end, the Mansoura Criminal Court sentenced Muhammad to death by hanging after obtaining the opinion of Egypt's Grand Mufti, having found him guilty of premeditated murder. In its written judgment, the court delivered harsh criticism of Muhammad. It stated that his engagement to the victim's daughter should have strengthened the bond of trust between him and Ashraf and brought him closer to the family. Instead, the court said, he abused that trust and exploited his close relationship with the victim to murder the man who was supposed to become his father-in-law in an exceptionally brutal manner. As for Mena, because she was a minor at the time of the crime, she was treated under Egypt's juvenile justice laws rather than as an adult defendant. She was placed in a juvenile social care institution instead of being tried in the same manner as an adult. Later, Egypt's Court of Cassation, the country's highest criminal appellate court, upheld Muhammad's death sentence, making the verdict final and bringing one of the most shocking and heartbreaking cases of family betrayal in Dakalia Governorate to its legal conclusion. After nearly 2 years of court hearings, waiting, and uncertainty, Ashraf's family finally felt that justice had been served, even though no verdict could ever bring back the man they had lost so brutally. For a long time afterward, people throughout the village continued talking about the case as one of the most disturbing crimes they had ever witnessed, not only because of the brutality of the murder itself, but because the betrayal came from within the victim's own home. This story is not just about murder. It is about how selfishness and the desire for immediate gain can drive people to betray the person who loved them most. the one who raised them, protected them, and sacrificed so much for their future. Ashraf Saeed devoted much of his life to caring for his daughter. He refused to allow her to marry at an early age, not out of stubbornness, but because he wanted to protect her rights and secure her future. He worked hard to provide her with everything she would need to begin a stable life. Tragically, the very determination to protect her future ultimately became one of the reasons that cost him his own life. And with that, today's episode comes to an end. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you receive all the new episodes. See you in a new episode. Goodbye.